Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peter Watches TV, where I cover all the TV shows over here. I watch all the TV shows, I watch all the reality TV shows. I am currently binge watching Sister Wives, I'm watching Big Brother, The Housewives. I watch all the limited series on Netflix and Apple and Peacock and Paramount and all the channels. Max, I love Max. And I also cover a lot of true crime over here. And I have like 4 true crime documentaries that I have recently watched. I just watched them in the last week that I want to cover over here. Today I'm going to cover the Laci Peterson story, American Murder, Laci Peterson on Netflix. But I also want to cover in the next couple of days Taken Together, which is on HBO Max. And I also want to talk about At Wit's End, which I believe is on Hulu. So I have those 2 to cover as well. But today I want to talk about the Laci Peterson case. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about the Laci Peterson case, I wanted to do this video yesterday, but the reason why I'm covering the Laci Peterson case today is because this documentary just came out on Netflix. It's called American Murder, Laci Peterson. And it is I believe it's a 3-part series about the Laci Peterson case. The reason why I want to make sure that I get this video out today is because today on Peacock, a new 3-part series about the Scott Peterson, Laci Peterson case is coming out, and it's from Scott Peterson's point of view, and it's called Face to Face. I think it's really, really interesting, and I want to get into this before I get into my reaction to this documentary. I think it's really, really interesting that I think it's been 22 years that this case happened, or that this murder happened, and in 22 years, a lot has happened in this case, right? Just recently, in March of 2024, the Innocence Project took on this case, and they are asking that, and a hearing was held, and they were granted this, that certain DNA would be tested, and that would, that would discredit the original finding, and that would free Scott Peterson. And they wanted DNA testing done, and I'll explain this later in the video, but they also had certain evidence that was not shown in the original case that has since come to light. So they're wanting to reopen this case. I don't know if that's going to happen. Laci Peterson's family does not want this to happen. I believe it was in 2020 that Scott Peterson was sentenced to death, and in 2020, Scott Peterson's team, who is working overtime to do whatever they can to free this man, Scott Peterson went back to court for his sentencing, and they reduced his sentencing to life without parole because what they found was that one of the jurors, hold on a second, I have it written exactly here how it said. In 2020, the death penalty was overturned due to a jury improperly being screened for bias against the death penalty, and he was resentenced to life in prison without parole because specifically this specific juror had a history of domestic violence, and so apparently that played into it, and so they reduced his role because they didn't screen this juror appropriately for bias towards the death sentence. So that has happened, and so in 22 years, he continues to fight this case, and apparently continues to maintain his innocence. So the Innocence Project has taken on this case. Now, I do want to say this before I get in this video, that I went in and I looked at the statistics for the, I have them all pulled up here. Hold on a second. Let me see if I should have had this, but I was just doing another video. I should have had this pulled up before. Okay, hold on a second. The Innocence Project, I looked up their statistics, and the Innocence Project statistics, oh my gosh, okay, Innocence. Well, I should have gotten to the better part of this video first, talking about my reaction to all of this. But anyway, the Innocence Project, as of May 2024, the Innocence Project has found that in about half of the cases that they take, DNA testing confirms that their client's guilt. Okay, so that means that half of the clients that they take confirms, the DNA testing that they do confirms their guilt. So I think the Innocence Project, which I followed a lot of cases, like the West Memphis 3, the Innocence Project took them on, and they actually got exonerated from their case, for their sentencing and things like that, and their conviction because of the Innocence Project. I think the Innocence Project today, in 2024, has this reputation that anybody that they take gets freed. So I thought that these statistics were interesting, that only half of the cases that they take actually have any merit to it. The other half, from the DNA evidence that they ask for, are found to be guilty. The Innocence Project has proven clients' innocence in about 43% of cases, and evidence was inconclusive in about 15%. The Innocence Project is an organization that uses DNA and other scientific advancements to prove wrongful convictions. Since its founding in 1992, it goes on, The Innocence Project has documented over 375 DNA exonerations in the United States. These exonerations include people who were wrongfully convicted of murder and sexual assault and who spent an average of 14 years in prison. Some of the reasons for wrongful convictions that the Innocence Project has identified is, and it goes in this whole thing. So I just wanted to give you guys that before I went in to my reaction to this, because I watched the documentary and then I had heard, because people had let me know, that there were updates to this case. And so after I watched the documentary is when I looked at the updates on this case. What's interesting to me about this is that this is why I believe after 22 years they're putting this documentary out on Laci Peterson on American Murder on Netflix. I also believe after 22 years it's the reason why they're putting out this Peacock from his point of view called Face to Face, the three-part series from Scott Peterson's point of view. I think it's very, very interesting that this story is picking up a lot of traction. I have to believe to some degree the Innocence Project, which is highly funded by a lot of celebrities and a lot of people with a lot of money, that there is some marketing that is going on behind here. Now, I will say that the Laci Peterson documentary on Netflix, I thought painted a very clear picture that Scott Peterson was the one that did these crimes. Now, in a lot of these true crime coverage, you have to be kind of careful about what you say in videos like this person did it, this person, because people have asked me, do you think Scott Peterson did it? Without a doubt. Scott Peterson was convicted of murdering Laci Peterson. Absolutely convicted. Her parents don't even want this Innocence Project to go to case. And the mother, if you watch the documentary, has said, I love Scott. Like, he was my son-in-law. I love Scott. They loved Scott and stood by his side until it came out that he was having an affair, and he was lying to them and he wasn't being cooperative with the police investigators. It's not just about the DNA testing and all this kind of stuff. It's a lot about Scott Peterson's behavior at the beginning of this case. That he wasn't out in the park looking when other people were at all times, okay? That he was unwilling to give media interviews when the entire rest of the family, including his family, was giving media interviews. He wouldn't give interviews until it was later to save face because he was the one that people were looking at, right? It was his behavior. It was his continuing to talk to the woman that he was having an affair with after his wife was murdered. It was all these things. It was the fact that her body and the body of his unborn child was found in a bay that he used as his alibi of where he was fishing. Although originally he said he was golfing, then he said he was fishing in that bay. Their bodies were found in that bay. There's a lot of, evidence out there that is, it all points in the direction of Scott Peterson. So when people want to ask me, do you think Scott Peterson did it? Absolutely, 100% I think Scott Peterson did it. If DNA testing comes out and proves otherwise, I will get on video and I will say, Scott Peterson didn't do it. But as of today, with the evidence that I have seen and the documentaries that I have watched on this, and after I watch this, I watched several interviews and stuff like that. It's interesting. They show clips of his interviews in the documentary, but they don't show the whole interview. When you watch the whole interview that all these different interviews he's done, I mean, it's even more shocking than just the clips that they show. Like, he has there's no, sadness. There's no, he is not upset at all that his wife is missing, okay? And so when you look at all of this, as of today, I 100% believe that Scott Peterson is guilty for the murder of Laci Peterson, and he was convicted of that. So that doesn't even have to be alleged. You can say that. He was convicted of these murders. He's sitting in prison for life without parole for these murders. So let me tell you about this. What I have to say, and in all honesty, I actually wrote this down first because I'm kind of tired of sugarcoating shit. A lot of times when I watch these true crime documentaries, I have a very strong feeling about something, and then I'll get on video, and I feel like I kind of dull it down a little bit. It's not really how I would talk to a friend about the true crime documentary. So I'm not sugarcoating shit over here. I'm gonna give you guys the real deal of what I think, okay? On reacting to this. Now, I want to tell you, I did not follow the Laci Peterson case, okay? I did not follow it at all through the years. I knew that Laci Peterson had been kidnapped, that she was pregnant. I knew that she had been found and that her unborn infant had been found, her unborn son. I knew that Scott Peterson had an affair. I knew that Scott Peterson had been convicted of this and sent to prison. I did not know about the death sentence and the life and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know about the interviews. I didn't know a lot about, I really didn't know much about this case. This was not a case that I followed very closely. I actually like to follow the smaller cases and not the bigger cases sometimes. So this was a case I didn't know anything about. So going into watching this documentary, I was very, very interested in a few things. And one of the things I was very interested in, and I always am interested in, is how is the victim and the victim's family portrayed in a documentary? Because I feel like they should pay homage to the victim and not just paint a picture of the murder and all that kind of stuff for hype for the documentary. I thought this documentary did a fantastic fantastic job of interviewing the family members, especially the mother. The mother was so strong in this, and the 3 friends from high school. Well, there was like a best friend they interviewed. I loved her. The 3 friends from high school that sit on a couch, I actually posted their picture on Instagram, and I said, this is what true friends look like. Get you some friends like this. Because those 3 friends were like ride or die. I lived for those girls. So I think that they did a really good job of painting a picture of who Laci Peterson was long before she passed away, long before she went missing, and what she should be remembered for. I also loved when the mother at the very end said something to the effect of, he ruined a lot of people's lives, and then she said, he didn't ruin my life. He doesn't have that kind of power. She was like, I miss Laci, something to that effect. She's like, I miss Laci, and I will always miss Laci. She also said something that I love, because it's something that I was told when my mother passed away. She says, you don't really ever, like people say move on. She goes, you don't really ever move on. You move through it, but you carry it with you forever. And I have said that in so many videos. And so many people have responded to me and said, I love that. Well, her mother says that in the documentary. She says, you move through the pain, but you carry that with you forever. I will carry it with me forever. Her mother is so real and just so strong. And, it's like, a lot of people say, like, well, what do you do in a situation like that? I mean, I've known a lot of people in situations similar to that have completely fallen apart, rightfully so, understandably so, that got caught up in addiction and things like that. I mean, she powers through. She showed up to every single day of the court hearing, or the court trial, except for, like, one day when she was sick and when they talked about the specifics of how they found Laci's body, because she didn't want to hear those parts, She showed up every single day, as did many members of the family. I was greatly, greatly impressed with this documentary. I thought it did a great job of honoring the victim. I thought it did a great job in a very short period of time. Some documentaries, they carry the story out. This At Wit's End that I just watched, I felt like it was too long. I felt like they carried it out too long. But this documentary was done so well in telling the story, in bringing in the key elements of it, and interviewing the detective that was on the scene at the beginning, and interviewing friends, and interviewing Scott Peterson's sisters as well. I mean, they look like a bunch of idiots, but in interviewing them, see, I said I'm not sugarcoating it. They did. They look like idiots, okay? They were willing to accept any excuse from Scott Peterson other than the fact that our brother might be a murderer. There might be some small chance, maybe 0.0000001% that your brother might be a murderer, but they were unwilling to hear that. Absolutely unwilling to hear that, right? Okay, so I thought that they did a great job, but the documentary didn't paint a negative picture of the family. They allowed them to have their piece and say what they wanted to say and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to say that, first of all. I also wanted to say that having an affair, because this was like a big point of conversation. So it comes out that Scott Peterson is having an affair on his wife with Amber Frey, okay? And so Amber Frey is actually the one that basically takes down Scott Peterson, which I lived for that moment, okay? I love Amber Frey. You need to be very proud of your actions through all this. She didn't know, I don't know if more has come out about this, but in this documentary, she didn't know that Scott Peterson was married. Scott Peterson tells her on the 9th of December that his wife, this is his first Christmas without his wife. That was the day that he bought the boat. I mean, I don't know how, okay, DNA testing, great, but maybe he had other people involved in it. I don't know. But there's a lot of evidence that points directly to Scott Peterson. So there was this whole conversation about, the jurors were talking about the fact that having an affair doesn't make you a murderer. I 100% agree with that. And I have some notes here. Having an affair doesn't make you a murderer. True, but having an affair with your 8.5 month pregnant wife and telling your girlfriend that you could take care of her for the rest of her life at the same time that your wife is missing kind of does make you an asshole and a scumbag. And if you didn't do it then you could have told your wife, and maybe if you had told your wife that you were having an affair, okay, and she was, as you are now speculating, okay, kidnapped by burglars that she witnessed across the street and then later killed, she wouldn't have been at home, because weeks before you even engaged in the affair, what you would have told her was, I'm no longer in love with you anymore, okay? And she probably wouldn't have been staying in her house as a single 8.5 month pregnant woman. She probably would have gone and stayed with her mother, or she probably would have gone and stayed with one of her high school friends or her best friend. She probably wouldn't have been in that home alone, okay? Which means that she wouldn't have been at risk. But your having an affair indirectly puts her in the path of this murder, right? Whether she was murdered by you or whether she was murdered by people across the street that she witnessed her doing a burglary, which is now what the Innocence Project is suggesting, okay? But had he not had an affair on her, had he been honest with her and said, I'm not in love with you anymore, I don't care if you're 8.5 months pregnant, okay, any 8.5 month pregnant woman probably on Christmas Eve wouldn't be at home alone by herself witnessing a burglary across the street. She probably would have been crying her eyes out at her mother's house. But you didn't give her that, did you? Okay? So, no, having an affair doesn't make you a murderer, but it does make you a complete asshole that didn't give your wife options in that moment. So you either killed her or you put her in the line of fire, one or the other, and your affair allowed you to do that, okay? But if you did do it, okay, if you did do it, I just want to say, could you please tell Chris Watts hi for me when you see him in hell? Because I do believe that there is a special place in hell for family annihilators, okay? Especially those that kill children and unborn children specifically, okay? And there are a lot of similarities between you and Chris Watts, okay? So I hope to God that they don't put y'all in the same prison. But maybe the same demons that need to be exorcised, that's what he claims. I think he's come out now and said that's not true. But the same demons that Chris Watts claims that invaded his body to kill his wife and children, maybe you need to have those exorcised from your body as well. I don't know, okay? One of the things that was so interesting to me about this documentary was that his family refused to see the truth at all in any of the evidence. It wasn't just about the fact that, like, my brother's a murderer. It was like he shows up, dyes his hair blonde, grows a goatee to look like his brother in his ID, and they're like, what? He wasn't trying to flee to Mexico. He literally had Viagra in his bag, $15,000 in cash. I mean, he looked like he was going on Jerry Springer disguised. And the sisters are like, what? What are you talking about? Like, no, he wasn't going on the run. Your brother didn't look anything like, okay, his wife goes missing. Then they find her murdered in a bay where he's said fishing. And he all of a sudden is just spending his time in the bathroom with a box of Nice and Easy, covering his newly grown out goatee and his hair. And you don't think that's weird at all. You can't even get in a documentary and say, yeah, I thought it was kind of weird. You know, that my brother all of a sudden just dyed his hair orange. You don't even speculate about that. Oh, there's nothing to that. So while your sister-in-law that you seem to care so much about, because you keep on saying that, oh, wait, the very last 5 minutes of the whole documentary, you said that. Your sister-in-law is rotting in a bay, and so is your unborn nephew, okay? Your brother is in a bathroom coloring his hair and his goatee that he just grew out and cutting his hair real short to look like your other brother, and he's got his ID in his car, but you don't think that's speculative at all? At all? To even question it? I would question that with my best friends, my mother, my father, my husband, my dog. Are you kidding me? The ignorance that this family had to ignore anything to do with this whatsoever was just baffling to me, right? And they were completely unable to see the truth out of any of this, you know? I don't know, but they were delusional, and they couldn't see any of it. Like I said, I liked the 3 high school friends, and all this kind of stuff, and her family was really, really strong. His sister saying that he was trying to evade the police was inaccurate when on the day of her body and the body of his son's fetus was found. Okay, she says in here, her exact quote was that his trying to evade the police was inaccurate. That was her exact quote, okay? Well, what was he trying to do then? Can one of you sisters explain to me why he had a bad pact? With Viagra, that's weird enough, right? $15,000 of cash, okay? Scuba equipment, rope, change of outfits, change of disguises. He had stuff to disguise himself. Okay, and your brother's ID in that car. Can you explain that to me? 30 miles from Mexico border. Can you explain that to me? Okay, I didn't think so. So when the sister was talking about the attorney arresting him and coming down there, she says that it looked like that he was being taken to the slaughterhouse. It was just a terrible scene, she said. And I'm thinking to myself, your sister-in-law and your unborn nephew's fetus were just found in a bay a day ago. And you equate your brother being arrested speculatively with a lot of evidence pointing in his face as being taken to a slaughterhouse, and you think that's inappropriate? I mean, this is where the whole family seems very unhinged to me, okay? And you think that's an appropriate analogy to having a documentary that is going out to millions of people. Your brother being taken in front of all the media. He hasn't talked to the media before this. Do you remember this? He did a media tour for like 2 days that he controlled. He never was willing to talk about the media when his wife was missing. Now he's paraded in front of the media because they arrested him, which is what the people wanted. And you call it that he was taken to the slaughterhouse? It was horrible. What about your sister-in-law and your unborn nephew that are I mean, it was just disgusting to me to see the family at all in this, you know? Like, I mean, they just, I mean, maybe just say, like, yeah, there was a lot that was speculative to me and we didn't know if Scott did or not, but to just be like 100% no, you know? And sure, I will eat my words if the DNA comes out otherwise on my video. I absolutely will. But even then, to not even speculate about it with all the evidence that was pointing in his direction, to even say, he's my brother, but even I couldn't look away from the evidence. The evidence is glaring when you look at the case, you know? Anyway, so she says that. So I watched the documentary. I thought the documentary was fantastically done. Yes, I think Scott Peterson did it. If other evidence comes out otherwise, I will do an update on this video. Trust me, right? But in March of 2024, the Innocence Project asked for a hearing for further DNA testing and further discovery of evidence, okay, which I think has been granted. And then I already read the Innocence Project statistics. What they are saying, what they are speculating is that, okay, so if you watch a documentary, supposedly around the same time, they couldn't really nail down the day, whether it was between the 24th and the 27th, but a burglary occurred across the street, okay, from the Peterson home. And the people that lived in the home were gone. They came home on the 26th, I believe, and when they came home, the house had been robbed. So the burglar said it was the 27th, but it had to have been sometime between the 24th and the 26th. But they're also speculating that they wouldn't have come there during all this media. The burglar said that they saw the media there, and they knew that something was going on, okay, which would imply that it happened after Lacy Peterson went missing. But they could have been doing that to cover their tracks. We don't know. What the Innocence Project is suggesting, okay, and the attorneys for Scott Peterson are suggesting, is that Lacy Peterson witnessed a burglary across the street, okay? There was apparently a van that was burned on the 25th of December, all right? They've already looked into this, the detectives, and they said that this doesn't warrant any kind of a new hearing, okay? The judge even looked at the evidence and said this van burning has no bearing on this case whatsoever. But they found duct tape on Lacy Peterson. They want to do DNA testing on the duct tape, okay? And they found other things. So they are going to look into the case, and they are going to possibly reopen it with the idea that the burglars could have possibly done it. I'm not sure that I entirely believe that. I believe that Scott Peterson is responsible. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I, of course, will be covering the Scott Peterson part face-to-face on Peacock. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.